We have talked an awful lot about used graphics cards on this channel, and if you haven't totally made up your mind about whether or not they're worth looking into, I invite you to first watch this video right here. But now that low to mid-range cards have popped up in the new market and they are thriving, at least the prices are somewhat decent, I want to reassess the viability of certain used graphics cards, namely the value champion, in my opinion, and that's the GTX 1070. Thermal Grizzly's Carbonaut pads offer peace of mind, ease of installation, and industry-standard performance in a market crowded with mediocre thermal compounds. Our own testing confirms that they conduct heat appropriately and provide a safe and consistent membrane between the die or IHS and cooler. Best of all, you can grab them in several sizes and reuse them as many times as you'd like. Carbonaut pads are peace of mind in my book, and they're very consistent, and that's why I use them for CPU testing. Check them out via the link below. So the GTX 1070 can be purchased for around 200 USD equivalent on eBay, which is where I first suggest you look for used cards. You can buy on Craigslist and elsewhere, but the eBay buyer protection guarantee pretty much has you covered in case some shady seller tries to throw crap at you. The terms and protections heavily favor buyers on eBay, so in the off chance you do end up with a dud or falsely advertised product, you can usually get your money back. I've gotten my money back in literally every issue that I've had, and I've only had maybe 2 or 3 issues of the many things I've purchased on the site. But taking that risk into account, along with what we can assume to be a voided or expired warranty, is again, in my opinion, a small price to pay for a great 1080p and 1440p graphics card. I actually bought this card used, and apart from the fact that I've owned it, so that kind of makes it used by default, you wouldn't know that I bought this from somebody else just by looking at it. It's actually in really good shape. Now, truth be told, and I know this is news to all of you, graphics card vendors like EVGA generally prefer that you buy new cards. And the reasoning should be pretty obvious. While buying a used EVGA card in this case can be great on a small scale for PR, because, right, proliferating your brand is a good thing, new cards turn profits. They push inventory. And what we have here is an awfully close competitor to the GTX 1070 from a few years ago, the GTX 1660. I won't bore you with the elaborate architecture differences, memory buffers, port selection, design cues. I'll briefly list them on screen, but most of this you could look up in a matter of seconds. What I'm really after here are performance metrics. If the GTX 1070 is indeed the better card, and spoiler alert, it is, it's the better card, how much better is it? And how about thermals, sound? Is it really a black and white decision? Look, I'll be upfront with you. Again, this is the better performer in a majority of games tested, and I'm not really surprised. I still think the 1070 was the best modern value graphics card launched by the Green team. It's extremely efficient, it runs fairly cool, and is relatively affordable. And right now it's even more affordable, but it's used. And at this point, that kind of puts a damper on things. By contrast, the 1660 is newer. It plays nicer with the latest drivers, pulls even less power, runs cooler, and doesn't do as well in these games. Yeah, okay, that kind of took a turn there. It also sports 2 fewer gigs of VRAM, so if that matters to you. And while you're looking at these charts, you might also be wondering, why aren't you comparing this to the 1660 Ti? And the reason for that is simple. Price. The Ti costs around $60 to $70 more than the 1070 used for comparable performance in that case. And I'd recommend the used 1070 over a brand new 1660 Ti all day, straight up. But a 1660 non-Ti brings up a different dilemma. Does sacrificing a bit of in-game performance justify the peace of mind associated with a new card? And that's a question you really have to answer for yourself. Personally, I've never hesitated buying a used graphics card from eBay. A vast majority of GPUs don't randomly die. Sure, a fan might crap out on you. That's kind of inevitable. Moving parts tend to be the first things to die. But they're generally easy jobs, right? You can handle this on your own at home. That said, I wouldn't blame you for wanting to buy new either, for again, that peace of mind. Everyone values money differently, and everyone assesses risk differently. That's one of the joys of capitalism. Either way, both cards can handle 1440p with ease, as we've proven here. And perhaps the best part about all of this now is that modern 1440p gaming is accessible in the mid-range graphics card market thanks to cards like the 1660 and 1660 Ti, which I would regard as highly obtainable, at least in first world countries, for around, what, $200 or so. This is really good performance for the price. Now, I kind of want to backtrack there. I want to go off script a bit. I said first world countries, but that doesn't mean that first world countries will be able to buy cards like these for cheap. I mean, if you live in the EU, for example, you're going to be paying a pretty hefty import tax to have this card, unless it's absorbed by the company selling the card, and I highly doubt that's the case. I'm sure most of you living in Europe can attest to that. My wife lives in Germany, and prices over there are, some things are okay. Memory was pretty cheap the last time I went shopping there, but graphics cards are freaking expensive. So yeah, I should rephrase that. First world is not what I meant. If you live in the States, where a lot of this stuff is either designed or developed, it's cheaper to get it here. Although with the tariffs, you never know. I mean, these things could shoot up in price. I'm not sure how much of a bearing tariffs have on graphics cards at this point, but anything's possible in this economy, right? And one other thing I want to go off script about very briefly, build quality. This is a heavier card. It's a higher TDP chip, right? So it's gonna have a beefier cooler attached to it. But the build overall is just a bit more premium here, whereas this one cheaps out with a plastic shroud. It does have a metal backplate, just like this one does. Port selection, a bit more conservative on the 1660. You still have the single 8-pin supplemental power there. The 1070 does as well, at least this version of the 1070. I mean, this was one of the lower spec 1070s that you could buy from EVGA, and this is one of the lower spec 1660s you could buy. So I figured it was a fair comparison in that sense. I know I'm comparing used to new, but the prices are similar, and that's what I want you guys to consider. If you're trying to get the most value for your dollar, it's hard to resist the used market, especially here in the States. I can't speak for all markets. I only look at the States. This is the country in which I live, so I'm more familiar here, but who knows? I mean, this card could be 300 or 400 equivalent USD in your market, and this card could be 200 equivalent USD. It's a no-brainer in that case to go with the used card. Trust me, even if one of these dies and you don't get your money back, in that case, you could buy another one of these, right, and still be good. So, yeah, you have to weigh it out in your market. Do a bit of research. I can't speak for all whatever hundreds of countries out there, but you'd be fine with either of these cards. I will say that there's not a problem going with one or the other. I'm not going to look at you, you know, in a more negative light if you choose the new card. I get it. It's a 1660, like it's nothing stellar, but for 200 bucks, I think you're getting pretty darn good performance for it. You can find this card along with the 1070 affiliate link below if you're interested in checking those out. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I would appreciate that. Become a member if you're feeling especially fancy. Join Floatplane if you want to support us there. Support the cool devs on a new platform. We would appreciate it. I'm sure they would as well. Thank you guys for watching. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.